Testing. 1 2 3. 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 Testing. 1 2 3.
Askerkupana hilatanaka kuliakanaka. Hichuruk akan histapanyani tak tatantashipanyani. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the Nature and Culture Summit. We all wish sorry. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the Nature and Culture Summit. We also wish to welcome those who are watching us online, as the summit is being broadcasted. Before we begin, I would like to inform the participants that we have interpretation in 4 languages: French, Chinese, Spanish, and English. Upon your entrance to the meeting, you will be provided with the interpretation equipment. I would like now to give the floor to the Excellency Minister Huang Yan. In regards to the equipment, please make sure to return them when you exit the venue. We began with respectfully acknowledging that we are on the unceded and sacred territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka Mohawk people. To open this summit, I would like to invite Elder Charlie Payton, elder from the Mohawk Nation, who will speak in Mohawk language, followed by English. Mr. Payton, you have the floor.
Ona katikachokwa naki ona azawatom siuste naki wakre tokkare ni ona kene akatawana ka naki ona ajitawasre jini hadiri hot ni gwasutra kwa konahe nene hot jini ore tene no hot na wadari wasti juhake ona kchiki wahe atawate no wala tuhake Antawe hiara jini kanoro no hota jokot kao sikinista. Ona jini joko no te sawata weata kwekne te kwanuaratos. Tananeta no na katawana yera de chinu nikinista jehun jate. Jina hota ne yakota sira wae. Ohun de sua hunu kwa sua. Jini kone kut hakiro jinu wa sua. Rati hunja sirunis. Tananenyo ni wahi chikanu kwachra kero. Chiwahia kero. Tananenyo ni wahi na kero ne. Asni kutato ko kuma. Honesto sa heta ono usra. Nenyo ni wahi chikara kero. Chikarunta kero. Tanachini kune kudio. Ne kutidakenu jesres chake. Akara kumsuna kwa. Oskanu to net kwa kuano. Chikane kardunyo. Nenyo ni way yori huwan no hot ne rutigete. Ne chutko hakanagio hakanagio hake kunu junu ne jewanakare. I won't guess na kwa yunata won hatches kujun suma wajinua suma chini ha dine kodio tunu yunata won hatches akwe dia tunu warado. One skan ikona ya gwado se. One akwe dia tunu warado jino ho tene ohunja keka yunata won hatches. Di se yukia te genu hatches. Tokine na yo tuak ne yukwa ni kuna. One ne niyo ni tunu na katawana yera te ayakwa tu kwa uru. Ene kana kwa de kwa tani chista tuche. Ratiche ojito kuwa tonu ratiche nuches. Konika jitan sera asas kwa chini ore. Ne ako exkoa, oruye koa. Skariu, skachi era tawana tunkwa. Ne niyo ni wahine kayeri ni kawara kachi orote. Tunugo di ato roku yati soto guara di wera sredi ni guara chesta seki ako tiketsko. Kajit no yung wanos, yung kira ni silokta kwa. Tananen ni oni tekni dira kwa ruke, yachito wa chie ro tali hat no hunjaki chut kutak. Tananegi yakisot o garasna, yakisot asatan keneka karakwa, o garasna chut kuzak ne yakun sarajes, ne yagoyo tajes, onaya oner ahadinagare ratik saukuma. Ona ne jini ore dia disto kwadunyo. Ona gede yetino warado. Na ho te kari hake sana kwa ne skatane te hodiri wae na wako. Ne na one dia tino warado ka di tok ne na yo tuak. Ne ya kwa ni guna. Ona ne ni oni. Ne na kata wana yera te jinu ne sukwaya diso. Ne gi wara wai ne de sukwawi ne de sukwanakto dani. Ne se kon ai do no raro ke agwe guskone chinichi akwano tunyo one ki konek ne one sakeri wan hotu kone ne umani ro get serate. Excuse my coughing. I guess what I want, I didn't try to talk too long in my language, I guess, because I think that you need also to have a good understanding from our world about why we're here on this earth. And what we said is in our teachings at the beginning of the world, the Creator, He made human beings from the living earth. And when He did that, He made a male and a female. And He said to them, He picked up the living clay of the earth and He said, this earth is your mother. Always care for her and love her, and she will always care for you. And still to this day, she does that work. And so the only thing the Creator asked of us at that time, He gave us His mind. He gave us His fire and He put it in our blood. He gave us His breath and now you are alive. And He said, this Mother Earth that I told you, I always give thanks and love her and care for her. This earth is your mother. And this is the only instructions Creator ever asked us to have and to do as native people, original people of the lands. And I'm not just talking about this piece of land. I'm talking all over the world. There are native peoples that are tied, their belly button is tied to the earth there. And they all have their original instructions. And human beings were not the only ones to be given that. All of the animals, the deer, the different kinds of animals of the forest and the birds of the sky, they all have the same teachings as we do. And they still work with their mother. So all of you that have come today, I acknowledge each and every one of you for the work that you do. And we understand that our mother is suffering and she's hurting. She's feverish. She's sick. And they call that global warming. She shakes and she shivers, and so we call those things earthquakes and tsunamis. The wind will blow, and that's her fever, the warm winds that churn up the waters, and the heat. and the earth is suffering. And when the trees are burning, she's feverish. So something has to change. We need to get back to a place and a time where we can care for our mother again, because a lot of things that are happening is because we, as human beings, forgot our original instructions. In modern days now, for a lot of the big money peoples, the earth is not their mother. The earth is only something you buy and sell and excavate for the greater profit. And so we have to change those kinds of thinking. We have to get back to this thinking that our mother is the earth. We need to live with her and not against her or on her. So we turn and we give our greetings to our mother. And our mother wears a beautiful, beautiful ribbon dress, I always say. Like a woman who enters ceremony house, she wears a beautiful dress. Woven into that dress is all the grass life, the root life, the berry life, the medicines that grow. In that earthy dress is the bugs and the animals and things that always regenerate her energy and her power. They're the gardeners of the earth. In there are also all of the foods, the three sisters, the corn, beans, and squash, the leaders of all food life. I always tell people in our longhouses, every ceremony that we do for the whole year is about food. We give thanks and we dance and we sing for the food, because without food, there is no life. And we give thanks to all the food that grows for us. We turn to the waters of life and we acknowledge the waters of life, and we ask the water always to find a way to cleanse itself and cleanse herself, so the world we know it that we live in will be a place where we can find water that we can drink. You live this building is maybe half a mile or even not even that from the St. Lawrence River. How many of us can go to that river right at this minute and drink the water from that river because it's so polluted? And we did that all collectively because of our modern habits and the way we were taught. And so everything goes in that water, and everything in the water is suffering. We have to change the way we do things. And so now we turn to the fish that live in that water world, the bugs that live in that water world, the animals that live in that water world, the muskrat, beaver, the otters. We give them our greetings as well and always encourage them to find a way to survive because they're important. Now we turn to the forest, the smallest red willow, all the way to the great maple tree that we tap and make our maple syrup. We acknowledge that the tree, maple, is the leader of all tree life in our world. And without that tree, it's the leader. All the other trees won't come to life in the spring. What kind of a world would it be like when there are no more trees will grow? No more the lungs of the earth will stop. How much air will we breathe then? And so we acknowledge all things of the earth that work together. We give them our greeting as one mind, your mind, my mind, all of us. And she will hear us, and we give thanks for what they do, this earth. Now we turn to the sky, and the birds fly above our heads. All the different kinds of birds, the different jobs they do. We turn to the four winds, and the wind is special that blows in our hair. We turn to the thunder beings that take care, so that they say a long time ago there were beings that lived on the earth, I think in the times of the dinosaurs. And Creator saw they couldn't live with human beings, so he drove them under the earth, never to rise. They say if they ever should rise, their power would burn the earth and burn the skin and take away our breath. What the thunders have done for millions of years, us, human beings, we have undone in 100. Now we drill our wells into our mother the earth, and we suck the blood of those serpents to the surface. We boil it. We throw it in our gas in our cars, And sure enough, that breath of those serpents is burning this world that we live in. We call it global warming. We call it acid rain and all the other things that are hurting our world. We need to make a change. Those serpents don't belong at the surface. Maybe it's going to be inconvenient, but at least our mother will live, and we will too. And so we turn now to the sun, our older brother. We give him our greetings because he warms up the earth. We give our greetings to our grandmother, the moon, because she works with the monthly cycle of women so children can continue to be born. What would happen if the mother, grandmother moon, says, those people no longer care? I'm going to pull back my power and change my power. What kind of a world would we live in? How lonesome would it be when no more children would come to be born? When there's no more baby that will cry when he takes his first breath of life, and then the earth will fail. And so we turn to the stars now, and we give them our greetings. So as one mind, we give greetings to all things of the sky world, because they work for us and with us, and we thank them. And because they help us and care, we live. Now we turn to Creator and creation, and we thank the Creator for all allowing us another day to live. And because of that, we're able to breathe. We opened our eyes this morning. How many men, how many women closed their eyes last night, or even in the last minute or so, and they didn't open them again? And the Creator hides that from us every day that we live on this world. And the Creator hides it from us because He tells us that we never know when our time is done. The Creator has a stick and it's notched how many days we're allowed to live. When that's done, we cross over to the other side. And so every day when we open our eyes and we take another breath and we see the sunrise, then we should give thanks. And so now we give our greetings to the Creator. These my cousins here from BC, they were those beautiful young girls that sang the other day here. People, sometimes you see things and you say maybe people were not happy because they interrupted for a moment. But I don't think it was an interruption. I think it needed to be sung. People need to hear the passion of our people, that they care for this mother that we live on. I acknowledge them. And we need to acknowledge all of our people who stand up for this earth. And so I told those young people, our young cousins that gathered at our longhouse the other night, I said, and I'll finish with this story because it's important. It's one of our stories. They said there was a time when human beings lived forever and they never saw sickness or harm or death. And then they forgot to give thanks. They took life for granted. And in that time, in the villages, everything was plentiful. And the Creator, He saw that human beings forgot the original instructions. They forgot to care for this earth, the only thing the Creator ever asked us. And then all of a sudden it started. They went outside and there was no more birds. Then they went out and the wind changed. The sun grew dark. The moon wasn't as bright in the nighttime. The animals were gone. They couldn't find fish in the river and the water. And because the sun stopped shining for them, they got cold and they got hungry and they had nothing to survive with. And when the people were laying on the beds now and the bones of our ancestors were scattered around us, now they understood something needs to be done. And a young boy, he said, remember, our grandfathers used to tell us that we used to sing and dance and give thanks for our mother. Maybe we should do this again. And they began to break out the drum. They began to sing. They began to Thank your mother. Thank this earth. They began to dance. And then our mother began to hear, and she felt good again. And so the birds came, and the animals, and the sun shined again, and then life came back to the people. So in our ceremonies, we always tell those kinds of stories in our longhouses all across the country, whether it's this story or another, is about our purpose and why we should give thanks to this earth. Because when she stops hearing us and we don't care for her anymore, she will leave us. And people will say, that's an old story. It's not relevant today. But you tell me, I hear all over the place how many animals are going extinct as we breathe right at this minute. How many fish are suffering? How many trees are failing and dying because of our footprint on the earth? Pretty soon the air will change. Pretty soon the sun will change and the moon will change. Is this story any different? What's happening to us now than the story at the beginning of our world? We're in those times again. And maybe we should listen to that young boy. Listen to these young men and women that are around here from all over this world. And they're telling us we need to make a change. All these big money people that only care for buying and selling our mother, they need to listen. Because if they don't, they will suffer just like us. And the earth will change. And so listen to that young boy. Sing your song in your language, in your homelands. Put your hand on the earth and say, Mother, I care for you. Take your shoes off and walk on the earth. Grab some trees and say, Mother, I care for you. Listen to me, feel me. Help us so that our children that are coming in the future, they're not born yet. Maybe they can come to a world where they can breathe fresh air and drink fresh water. And they can be healthy again. And this is what I think I will end with. And this is the message of our people. This is the message and the words of our Creator long time ago, and they're as relevant today as they were at the beginning of the world. So I thank you so much for listening. Now we open your minds. We wipe your eyes so you can see clearly now. Wipe your ears so you can hear clearly. Wipe your throats so that you can speak the words that need to be said. Because if we don't do that, our mother is going to continue to suffer. And our path on this earth is not going to be long. All of these things, they don't matter. We think we have power. We have nothing compared to the power of the earth. So I thank you so much for listening. I wish you the best of luck.
I thank Elder Peyton for transmitting a message from the custodian of these territories and landscape. We will make a short pause just to make sure that interpretation is working. Let us pause for a minute.
Checking English and Spanish. Checking English and Spanish now. Speaking in English now actually. Check, 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 check. Check, check. Check, 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 check. Check, 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 check. Speaking in English channel. Let me know if you can hear me. Check, 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 check. Checking, checking, checking. Please let me know if you can hear me. Let me know. Check, 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 check. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Check, check, check. Speaking in English channel. 1, 2, 3. 3, 2, 1. Please let me know if you can hear me. Check, check, check. Check, 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 check. Check, 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 check. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Check, check, check. Are you still checking English channel? I'm still speaking there. Check, 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 check. Okay, crap. Check, 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 check. Let me set that up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Checking English channel. Checking English channel. Checking English channel. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Check, 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 check. Check, 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 check. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Check and speaking. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Checking. 1, 2, 3. Speaking in English channel. Speaking in English channel. English channel. Speaking in English channel. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Speaking in English. Speaking in English channel. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Speaking in English channel. Speaking in English channel. Check. Check. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing. Speaking in English channel. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Testing English. Testing English. Testing English. Check. Check. Testing. Testing English channel. Testing English channel. Testing English channel. Testing. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Testing. Testing. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Speaking in English channel. Testing. Speaking in English channel. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Checking. Checking English channel. Checking English channel. Checking English channel. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Check. Speaking in English channel. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Speaking in English channel. Speaking in English channel. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Check. Check. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Check. Check. 1, 2, 3. Testing English channel. Testing English channel. Let me know if you can hear me. Testing. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 3, 2, 1. Testing. Testing. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Checking English channel. Please let me know if you can hear me. Testing English. Testing English. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Testing English. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Testing English channel. Check. Check. 1, 2, 3. Check. Check. 1, 2, 3. English test. Testing English, testing English. Testing English, testing English. Testing English. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Check, 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 check. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Testing English channel. Testing English channel. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Check. Testing English. Testing English channel. Testing English channel. Testing English. Check. Okay, switching.
Technical issues with interpretation. It should be fixed soon. And apologies for this delay. Just to let you know, it will be fixed soon.
Testing. 1, 2, 3. 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 Testing. 1 2 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 3. Test. Testing. 1 2 3. 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 Testing. 1 2 3.
中国云南省是中国民族最多的省份，有26个世居民族，其中15个少数民族为云南特有。
Largest number of ethnic numbers. 我们的
the tradition and way of living of different ethnic groups. We promote cultural diversity and biodiversity at the same time. One example is the Yunnan province of China, which is also the place that held the first part of COP15. Yunnan province has the highest number of ethnic groups in China. It has 26 ethnic groups that has been living in Yunnan for many generations. And among them, 15 can only be found in Yunnan province. The culture in Yunnan is therefore very rich. For example, we have the terrace culture of Hani ethnic group.
各民族文化与当地的生物多样性紧密相连，形成了以哈尼族的梯。
有翻译，请稍等。
environment culture of the Tibet and ethnic group. All those diversified cultures showed us that we need to adopt an integrated approach to protect the environment as a whole. We need to protect mountains, waters, forests, farmlands, lakes, and grasslands all together. The Yunnan province has already incorporated cultural diversity and traditional knowledge into their provincial level biodiversity protection regulation.
全球生物多样性下降的趋势还没有得到根本的遏制，保护生物多样性已经成为人类面临的一项刻不容缓的任务。如何协同保护自然与文化多样性，是摆在我们面前一项重大课题。为此我愿提出以下的倡议。
At present, global biodiversity is losing. We are losing biodiversity. It is an urgent task for us to protect it. Therefore, at the same time, we also need to protect cultural diversity along with biodiversity. To this end, I would like to make the following proposals.
一是充分尊重和保护各地各民族的传统文化，通过保护文化的多样性，更好地保存和传承各地民族生产生活中的生物多样性保护意识，让保护生物多样性的文化自觉薪火相传。
First, we need to fully respect and protect cultures and traditions of different ethnic groups. Through protecting cultural diversity, we can raise people's awareness to protect biodiversity.
二是不断地挖掘和弘扬传统文化中生物多样性保护的理念，努力做好民族传统文化的发掘与整理，制定实施适合本地区、本民族自然与文化环境的生物多样性保护举措，推动各具特色、多姿多彩、丰富多样的生物多样性文化体系不断繁荣创新。
Second, we need to really look at all those wisdoms and philosophies on biodiversity conservation from our cultures. And we need to disseminate those knowledge so that we can have the best measures that is most suitable for local conditions.
三是加强文化间的互鉴互学和沟通交流，充分展现协作精神，调动各方资源，促进不同文明和文化的平等交流对话，相互学习借鉴，积极促进全球生物多样性治理的进程。
Third, enhancing mutual learning of different cultures. We need to work together, mobilize resources, and promote equal dialogues and exchanges between different cultures and traditions. We need to learn from each other and work together to promote global biodiversity governance.
女士们、先生们、朋友们，保护文化多样性是推动生物多样性保护的一项具体而有力的举措。我期待通过这次峰会，大家能增进理解，携起手来，共同挖掘、传承、保护和传播世界各地各民族的优秀生态文化，为构建人与自然和谐共生的地球家园，共建地球生命共同体，提供更多的智慧和方案。
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, protecting cultural diversity will be a very strong measure for us to protect biodiversity. With this summit, I hope that we can enhance mutual understanding, work together, and all be the ambassadors of all those wonderful cultures around the world and make our contribution to the building of a shared future for all life on Earth.
谢谢大家。
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister Hu Yang. I think we managed to have a solution for the interpretation in the room. I would like now to invite to project in the screen the QR code so you could access in your phones or in your computers. Maybe I can invite Nader to.
Yes. Hi, dear delegate. Apologies for the interpretation issue. Through YouTube, you can listen to the languages. Just log on to this link or the QR code, and you will be able to listen through your headset by selecting the languages transmitted on YouTube. Thank you very much. This is temporary. We're still working on it. Apologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Nader. I would just wait 1 minute for you to connect to your. We can still display the QR. This also, you can also find it in the schedule for the meetings of the COP15, and you can through that link you can connect to YouTube, and hopefully you will receive the interpretation in the 4 languages. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Stéphane de Vouillers, Assistant Deputy Minister of the International Affairs Branch of Environment of Canada, for his opening remarks. Please, Mr. Vouillers, you have the floor.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to participate in today's event. To protect nature is to protect our common future for generations to come. In Canada, we are a large, biodiversity-rich country, and we have a big role to play in contributing to our own biodiversity protection into the world. Canada is home to 20% of the Earth's wild forests, has the longest coastline, biggest remaining wild rivers, and an estimated 80,000 species. The role of Indigenous partners underpins our work to conserve and protect nature, and I am pleased to see that Indigenous leaders are part of the discussion today. Indigenous language and culture reveal important details about our local ecosystems. The key to restoring our balance with nature in Canada is close collaboration and partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, and by mobilizing multiple ways of knowing. Indigenous peoples have been stewards of the land, waters, and ice, and leaders in ecosystem conservation since time immemorial. Canada is working to halt and reverse nature loss by 2030 at home, while achieving a full recovery for nature by 2050, promoting the vital role of Indigenous peoples in this work and championing these goals internationally. In Canada, working with partners is essential as land available for conservation and protection are under diverse jurisdictions. Protected and conserved areas are established in close collaboration with provincial, territorial, and municipal governments, Indigenous peoples, non-governmental organizations, philanthropic organizations, foundations, and the private sector. On December 7th, the Prime Minister of Canada announced up to $800 million to support Indigenous-led conservation efforts, including 4 major projects from coast to coast across Canada. This investment will support the establishment of protected areas through an innovative funding model, Project Finance for Permanence, or the PFP, which is based on partnership. It brings together Indigenous organizations, governments, and the philanthropic community to identify shared goals for protecting nature and ultimately halting biodiversity loss. Community leadership and the work of philanthropic organizations are key to this important work. These PFP projects are a major step forward in protecting nature across the country and will drive progress towards Canada's ambitious goals of conserving 25% of land and waters by 2025 and 30% of each by 2030. Not only will these projects conserve biodiversity, they will also protect ecosystem services, connect landscapes, store carbon, support Indigenous knowledge and understanding, and preserve Indigenous cultures. Launched in 2017, Indigenous Guardians initiatives support Indigenous peoples in exercising their responsibilities in their traditionally used lands, waters, and ice. These initiatives promote social and community well-being through connections to the land, culture, and language, while helping communities fulfill their objectives on monitoring, managing, and maintaining ecological and cultural conditions in traditional territories. Through initiatives like Indigenous Guardians, we can fight the twin crises of climate change and biodiversity loss, strengthen relations between Indigenous partners, and build a better future for everyone. We know that the protection of nature is intrinsically linked to culture, the well-being of communities, and our common futures for generations to come. In Canada and elsewhere, protecting biodiversity must be done hand in hand with Indigenous peoples. The role of Indigenous partners underpins our work, and Indigenous-led approaches are an essential part of Canada's path forward, both for protecting nature and working towards reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. Thank you.
Give the floor to Mr. Chen, who will speak from the podium and interpretation.
那么接下来就会从讲台发言，陈先生。
Mic to the podium. Could you press it? Could we open the mic to the podium? IB colleagues, could we open the mic in the podium?
OK， 尊敬的黄润秋先生、斯蒂芬先生、伊丽莎白·穆勒马女士、索尼娅女士、露西女士、克勒恩女士、哈布特先生、卡西迪女士、女士们、先生们、朋友们，大家上午好。
His Excellency Mr. Huan Runqiu, Madam Elizabeth Murum, and Mr. Stefan, Miss Sonia, Miss Lucy, Miss Cloen, Miss Cassidy, and Mr. Hubbard. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends, good morning.
非常感谢各位参加自然与文化多样性峰会。借此机会，受云南省人民政府委托，我谨代表云南4700多万各族人民，向大家长期以来给予云南生物多样性保护工作的关心、帮助和支持，表示衷心感谢。
I'd like to thank everyone joining the Nature and Culture Summit, entrusted by Yunnan People's Government, and as one of the 47 million people of Yunnan Province, I would like to extend our appreciation to the great support and mighty help offered by many of you.
2021年10月 ，COP15 第一阶段会议在中国昆明成功举办，会议成果丰硕，社会反响强烈。中国国家主席习近平出席大会领导人峰会，发表题为“共建地球生命共同体”的主旨讲话。
COP15 Phase 1 was a good success in October 2021 in Kunming, with fruitful outcomes and gained vast attention. President Xi joined the Leaders' Summit virtually and addressed a keynote speech, titled Building Community of All Life on Earth.
大会通过了标志性成果《昆明宣言》，中国宣布率先出资成立昆明生物多样性基金，举办了生态文明论坛，发布了保护生物多样性、共建全球生态倡议，为2020年后全球生物多样性治理奠定了政治基础，指明了方向，提供了支持。
The iconic output of the conference of COP15 is namely the following. First, the Kunming Declaration and the Kunming Biodiversity Funds, as well as the Ecological Forum with the proposal of biodiversity conservation, building global ecology in joint effort, were cornerstone and a signpost for post-2020 global biodiversity governance, providing critical support.
COP15 第一阶段会议之前，云南亚洲象北上南归之旅，更是惊艳世界、温暖人间，生动地讲述了云南生物多样性保护的故事，成为了全球人与自然和谐共生的典范。
Before COP15 Phase 1 was commenced, the voyage of Asian elephants family wandering northbound and returning safely home at south was an astonishing scene that attracts attentions globally. Story to everyone. This is truly a paradigm of harmonious coexistence of man and nature.
生态文明关乎人类未来，建设绿。
The ecosystem culture is so important to everyone's future. For a long term, our government pay extremely attention to protect the nature.
不断推动生物多样性主流化，实现了生态高颜值与发展高质量相得益彰、相互共进。
Ecological civilization builds on future of mankind. It is a shared dream of all to build a green homeland. For decades, Yunnan had been taking ecological protection on top of its agenda. The socio-economic development of the province places green beauty Yunnan, coexist of man and nature strategy at its center. Biodiversity conservation is mainstreamed and incorporated in the overall economic and social development of the province. Mainstreaming of biodiversity is constantly promoting in practices and benefit to a balanced and high-profile development.
我们
We try to establish the expert committee to issue the very first regulation in bioprotection in order to set up the protecting network for the biodiversity to enhance
Commission and biodiversity funds, promulgating the first local regulation on biodiversity conservation in China, designating biodiversity conservation red line, establishing and improving network for biodiversity, enhancing organization of work and decision making, reaching out social funds, had worked jointly to protect 90% of typical ecosystem and 80% critical species provincial-wide.
拓展社会资本参。
Following long and committing efforts by biodiversity conservation of Yunnan are moving ahead among other regions of China in terms of biodiversity conservation.
Yunnan are moving ahead among other regions of China in terms of biodiversity conservation.
下一步， 我们将以 COP15 成功举办为契机，
As next step forward, we will continue to extend follow-up efforts of legends from COP15 to deepen and enroll in international cooperation, joining in cooperation and endeavor with each other in pursuing balance.
Deepen and enroll in international cooperation, joining in cooperation and endeavor with each other in pushing balanced development of man and nature. Yunnan is ready to make its contribution in creating better future.
女士们、先生们、朋友们，云南是中国重要的生物多样性保护和西南生态安全屏障，各大生物类群物种数接近或超过全国一半，其中有高等植物
among which there are 19,333 higher plants, 2,273 vertebrates, 5
The Chinese biodiversity treasure and biosafety barrier in southwest region. The population of various major biological taxa and species are close to or half of domestic total population, among which there are 19,333 higher plants, 2,273 vertebrates, 542 key protected wild plants of Chinese domestic importance, and 386 terrestrial wildlife.
众多生物类群物种造就了云南植物王国、动物王国、世界花园。
The groups of species made Yunnan the reputation of kingdom of flower and fauna, water garden, etc. Yunnan is also home of the largest population ethnic groups, among which 15 of them are specialized in Yunnan. The ethnic groups are living interdependently, which result in colorful and splendid culture.
Of flora and fauna, world garden. Yunnan is also home to the largest population of long-dwelling ethnic groups. There are 26 of them, and among which 15 are endemic to Yunnan province. The ethnic groups are living interdependently, which result in colorful and splendid ethnic culture. For years, the ethnic groups are getting along in peace and work in concerted effort to harmonious development.
当前，云南正致力于打造。
Currently, Yunnan is devoted to build international biodiversity tourist destination. For example, Pudacuo Yulong Snow Mountain, Lugu Lake. For example, Ailao Mountain, Meili Snow Mountain, and Puzhehai.
The tourist destination. To name a few, Pudacuo Yulong Snow Mountain, Lugu Lake, Gaoligong Mountain, Ailao Mountain, Meili Snow Mountain, and Puzhehai. These sceneries are widely known as ecotourism brands. Wetland parks of Lashihai and Napahai, Baihualing, and Xiniaogu are globally recognized bird watching destinations.
昆明斗南已成为世界第2、亚洲最大的鲜切花交易中心。云南咖啡已是雀巢咖啡的原料供应地和星巴克的重要种植基地之一。可以说，云南对多样性优势的利用更加突出，一大批云南高原特色农产品正享誉全国，走向世界。
Market in the donut market in Kunming is the second biggest global fresh cut flower market. Yunnan coffee is the essential supplier of raw material to major coffee dealers such as Starbucks. In other words, the advantages in biodiversity resources is exploited to the largest extent, and a big number of featured products from Yunnan are making its fame in China and further beyond.
在此，
Hereby, please allow me to take this opportunity on behalf of 27 million residents in Yunnan from different groups to invite everyone to visit Yunnan and experience beauty of ecological environment, humanity culture in Yunnan. I also would like to wish a great success of this summit. My sincere wishes of good health and of the best. Thank you all.
47 million residents in Yunnan province from various groups to invite every distinguished guest to visit Yunnan and experience beauty of ecological environment, humanity culture in the open Yunnan. I would also like to wish a great success of the summit. My sincere wishes of all good health and all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chen. Now I would like to invite Elizabeth Maroma, Executive Secretary of the Convention, for your opening remarks.
现在呢，我们现在进行大会的开幕式演讲。非常感谢，尊敬的各位阁下，尊敬的土著居民和当地的社区代表，尊敬的与会者。考虑到本次活动的性质，我首先要承认，我们的聚会的举行的地方是一块未被承认的土著土地。按照土著居民的惯例，我想恭敬的感谢卡涅尔卡哈卡，是来自于莫霍克族。我感谢查理巴顿长老转达了来自于这片领土和地貌的守护者的信息，这个很明显是很重要的信息。本次峰会的组织工作得到了很大的支持，这些支持来自于联合国教科文组织、世界自然保护联盟
and environment through the ECROM IUCN World Heritage Leadership Program. To them all, and on your behalf, our sincere thanks of appreciation. This two-day summit is a significant opportunity because we are living in a crisis that is not yet probably fully understood. Biodiversity loss directly harms the diversity and the diverse nature values of nature, creativity, and well-being, particularly those who maintain the distinctive spiritual relationship with their environment and the lands. This room is filled with people from around the world, the young generation, the elders, the women, and the custodians of traditional knowledge that we should be listening for our last chance to save our life on earth, including ourselves. One example of the relationship between nature and culture is the knowledge of indigenous peoples and local communities. Although indigenous peoples constitute approximately 6% of the world's population, they represent the most significant proportion of global linguistic and cultural diversity. Similarly, their territories that account to around 20% of the land overwhelmingly contain the most significant remaining and sustained biodiversity. Despite this evidence, indigenous peoples and their local knowledge are not treated as equal partners or the same footing as other knowledge systems. One day, we will look back in time at this moment to the rich discussions that will inevitably come out of this summit and know that we acted when we had a chance. After 30 years of the Earth Summit, the convention still faces great challenges despite the many actions taken and the achievements made. The Convention on Biological Diversity must become a dynamic and effective body relevant to stop the bicultural crisis. The Working Group on Article 8J, since the year 2000, has placed the relationship of bicultural diversity high up on the table. This summit builds on the joint program of work on the links between biological and cultural diversity, which is wrapping up its lessons learned from the past decade of 2011 to 2020. At this Conference of the Parties 15, the global community will renew its commitment to the joint program of work as an important tool to implement the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework when it is adopted. Therefore, the summit speaks directly to the heart of the convention and shows us that cultural and biological agendas are complementary. The artificial separation has, if anything, accelerated the loss of cultural and biodiversity, biological diversity. A coalition of valued partners for nature and culture with full and effective participation of indigenous peoples and local communities is evolving and enriching our understanding of biocultural diversity in the post-2020 era. This dialogue serves as a platform for your engagement today in order to build a critical platform to consolidate our future course of action based on respect, solidarity, and complementarity. And we are pleased to announce that yesterday, Saturday, 10th December, this 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties at the plenary adopted agenda item L10. This is on item 26 on nature and culture. The adoption of the new elements of the joint program of work that will be in function for the next 10 years and ensure that nature and culture, different values, and indigenous peoples and local communities' contributions are reflected in the implementation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Their early adoption of these decisions in this process of the COP15 augurs well for the remaining negotiations and the future work ahead of us. Just like nature, we are all connected. Together, let us change the path of our journey with our eyes fixed on a world where nature and culture are mutually supportive. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of it all. Thank you, and I wish you fruitful discussions.
Thank you, Ms. Marema. I want to thank the Minister of Ecology, Mr. Juan, for being with us today, as well, Ms. Marema. I understand that you both have other commitments, but again, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, I would like to, we will hear from a pre-recorded message from the Deputy Director Deputy Director General of UNESCO, Ms. Hyun Kyu. Please, Abby, could we play the video?
Ladies and gentlemen, the biodiversity for humans is extremely important. Biodiversity is important for everyone and everything. These are the words of the diversity adopted by the UNESCO member states from 2001. They remind us that diversity is ecological and cultural. They are linked together. They work together. They are in balance with each other. They help each other. Outside of this COP15 about biodiversity, we need to remind ourselves that nature and culture in both phases are important for living beings. They're vital for living beings. We've got to remember this. We've got to remember the high importance of the human beings, all living beings. And this in many societies has been forgotten. It doesn't make sense for them. And this is a different vision of life. And this shows us in the language of Laksik, in Lakota, in North America, the original language, the word Viktakoi means everything is life, everything is alive. Now we are facing a climatic crisis. Biodiversity is losing itself. And here, UNESCO is working on it. It's this ethical idea that we need to put into the heads of the people in 154 member states of the UNESCO that have, for 54 years, have been reminding us that nature and culture, they are interdependent, indissociable. They are one. And now we have a unique biodiversity. So 1/3 of the elements, or for example, we only have 1/3 of tigers in the world. And this is what we need to promote in our 738 biospheres, that there are so many species that are going to be extinct, such as these tigers I was mentioning before. And there are 200 million people in more than 3,000 countries. So we've got to remind ourselves that the living being needs to be protected. And this idea is so present, but it's so ancient. We've got to work in these reserves of biosphere. And here we're working in the reserve, which is called Sandheim Sudhoin or something like that. And this is administered by Indigenous people. They have the knowledge. We should listen to them. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen.
World, we have much to learn from Indigenous peoples and their approaches to life. We must take into account their knowledge in scientific publications and public policies. And this is what UNESCO is doing with its Links program on Indigenous knowledge. We must also listen to their needs, protect their languages, their lexicons, their taxonomies, for losing this cultural and linguistic diversity will only weaken our relationship with nature. Raising awareness of these issues is precisely the aim of the International Decade of Indigenous Languages, celebrated a few days ago in Paris, which UNESCO is proud to lead. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is time that we understood that to preserve biodiversity, we of course need technical tools, partnerships, financing, but we also need a diversity of world views to nourish the change in relationship with the natural world that humanity needs. The Global Biodiversity Framework under discussion here in Montreal is a historic opportunity to break down the barriers that have separated nature and culture for far too long, to affirm that we are all part of the natural world. UNESCO is calling for this essential connection between cultural and biological diversity to be incorporated into this new global framework. I thank you. Je vous remercie.
I would like now to invite Ms. Sonia Peña Moreno, Director of the International Policy Center at IUCN. Ms. Peña, you have the floor. You can come here, yes.
Thank you very much. Very good morning to all of you, brothers and sisters. It is a pleasure for me to be here today and represent IUCN, International Union for the Conservation of Nature, at this inaugural plenary. Excellencies, colleagues, and friends, humans have inhabited and conquered our host planet since time immemorial. Numerous values, cultures, and customs have developed in every single corner of the world, adapting to the varied geographic and environmental conditions. The result is a mosaic that is rich and varied of cosmovisions and cultures. Can you imagine how boring it would be if all landscapes, territories, bodies of water, along with cultures, languages, and dances around the world, were all the same? However, many have chosen to overshadow, almost destroy cultural diversity by favoring forms of homogenization. Sadly, we have also destroyed our relationship with the natural environment around us. But it turns out that dependence of humans and nature is inseparable. Likewise, cultural diversity is as necessary for human civilization as biological diversity is for life itself. Recognizing that the connections between culture and nature provide a crucial and perhaps untapped potential for achieving the vision of living in harmony with nature, IUCN gladly welcomes this Nature and Culture Summit. This is a much needed space for dialogue and exchange, which is more than needed in the current context in which we live. IUCN recalls proposals for global partnership for nature and culture that were made in Sharm el-Sheikh during the COP14, and we welcome the pragmatic approach in setting out the priorities for work. We also support the invitation for a significant expansion of the joint work program on the linkages between biological and cultural diversity. Elizabeth just mentioned that this was adopted yesterday. IUCN stands ready to work along the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity, UNESCO, and other partners, and support follow-up to the element and texts that were crafted for the joint work program. The latter, this program, and we are confident about this, will be a decisive element for the implementation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. However, it is important to ensure that such framework is conceived using a language that resonates with the different cultures, with different ways in which all of us perceive the relationship with nature. We must support coordinated actions that responds to the diverse connections of nature and culture at the local level. The post-2020 global framework must ensure the conservation of biodiversity while supporting the diversity of cultures. This includes, as a priority, conserving biocultural diversity of indigenous peoples and local communities, and the traditional and local knowledge that infuse and reflect in most landscapes and seascapes of conservation significance. IUCN is working with Indigenous Peoples Organization, which are members of the IUCN, as well as with other stakeholders to ensure that their interests are appropriately listened to and properly integrated to the post-2020 framework. Friends, colleagues, most of us live in cities. I would like to stress that conservation approaches in urban and peri-urban areas also reflect the response to the connection between nature and culture as part of the many contributions and benefits that nature provides us with. I would like to conclude by making a call to action to work together to promote dialogue and awareness creation throughout society of the interdependence of biodiversity and cultural diversity for human well-being and environmental sustainability. Let us use this summit today and tomorrow to start or continue such a dialogue. Thank you so very much.
Peña Moreno.
Well, thank you very much, ma'am.
To invite Lucy Mulenkei, co-chair of the International Indigenous Forum Biodiversity, for your opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Kapak, and good morning, everyone. On behalf of the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity, we welcome you to this summit, and we also want to recognize and respect the indigenous peoples from this territory, these lands, where we are having the meeting. And we are very glad that we've been working with them this journey from the beginning. The blessings they gave us at the beginning when we came with our preparatory meetings, and today is a testimony of how these blessings we have, and that we look forward to having a successful meeting. Distinguished guests, delegates, and my indigenous peoples and local communities, nature and biodiversity are very close relatives. For us, nature, as is already explained by the elder, is something that is holding us, is something that is related to us and has given that biodiversity to us. Our cultures as indigenous peoples hold this biodiversity and nature together, and we all look at it in a holistic manner. And that is why we keep on emphasizing the importance of being able to work collectively together at looking and linking different aspects together. The issue of culture and nature is something that has been discussed by indigenous people for a long time. In Cancun, in COP13, we also had a similar summit, and we brought our issues on the table. We looked at it and reminded parties and partners who were there that nature is very close to us and is close to our nature. It's linked to our lives. It's linked to different traditional knowledge and traditional ways of our lives. So these are very crucial to us. And from there, we moved to Sharm el-Sheikh. Same thing, we had the nature and culture, where again, we emphasize quite a lot of issues that we really wanted to bring up on the table, considering, and we really had to focus on issues like human rights and why it's very important to look at the human rights approach. Because we want to make sure that everyone is in that particular nature, in that ball of Mother Earth that we have been given to be able to live together in harmony. And we will keep on working on that to make sure that at least everyone else understands the work that we are doing in terms of looking at culture and nature. At this time, I also would like to thank the donors, as mentioned already by the Executive Secretary, who have supported and taken us through that journey to support this particular discussion. And we hope we can continue, as the minister from China has already said, the president of the COP, that this is something that we have to carry forward. We have to look at it, and we have to respect and recognize the rights of indigenous peoples, local communities, and remote communities who are holding these cultures and who are linking their biodiversity conservation with their own way of life. I also would like to say that as indigenous people, we have been really very glad to see how the progress of work has been going on. And with a positive mind, we have been looking at the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Forum and really hope that the parties and all the discussions that are going on can really be able to make sure that by the end of this particular meeting, we have a global framework that will be able to lead us, not only us who are here, but to our societies, to our cultures, to our traditional communities, to our different people globally, is a tool that will be able to guide us. This is the time where we have to all come together and really put some of those ideas that we have to make sure that this particular global framework succeeds. And we really want to give International Indigenous Forum would like to really thank the two co-chairs who have been taking us through that journey and looking at our issues as Indigenous people and local communities and making sure that they are put it on the forefront. And of course, the parties who have also been looking at different issues that we've been discussing together. It's also very important to recognize the fact that the program of work of nature and culture and also the Article AJ and other targets have also been advancing in terms of discussion. And I will not select and say that these are more for Indigenous people and so on, because the global framework, all the targets are very crucial. They are very, very important to us all, and they impact us in one way or another. But at the same time, I'm pleased to say that the current draft DSI recognize our key contributions to the maintenance of biodiversity and proposes to create a global fund to help us continue to maintain and restore our nations with our relation with nature that provide benefits to Mother Earth and all the people. Culture is based on a balance between heart, mind, and spirit. And transformation change requires a transformation ethic for living in harmony with Mother Earth, including information on the silver threads of our life. We hope that going forward, we can work openly together and in partnership to be able to achieve this crucial development of having the post-2020 global framework. We know that culture and nature is really linked to most of our work that we are doing, and we are really very crucial, and it's very crucial. And when we look at the issues of land, territories, and waters, these cannot be separated from the cultures that we have and the issues that we have mentioned. Land and territories and waters that we have as Indigenous people and where Indigenous people live are very crucial also and important to be recognized, and the rights to prior-informed consent is very, very important to ensure that every activity and every decision that is made within those particular discussions. Indigenous people are already consulted and included in those discussions so that they can also be able to do their own, they can give their ideas and decisions. Remember, collective actions are very important, and we emphasize a human rights approach so that we can make sure that we are all included, we work together, and we carry this biodiversity that we have been given, not only for today or for tomorrow, but for the future generations to come, so that our great-grandchildren can also be able to benefit on what we already are benefiting. And despite the fact that we have destroyed it, but we need really to restore it and make sure that we make a difference in our lives and the future generations to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Mulenkei. Now I'd like to invite Chief Jerry Jack from the Assembly of First Nations to address the audience.
Hello, Gala Kesla. My name is Klakwa Gala. I am a hereditary chief from the Muchet First Nation in the west coast of Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada. And I am here today representing the Assembly of First Nations. But I'd just like to let you know that where I come from, we call it ground zero of contact, because in 1778, Captain Cook was the first white man to land in British Columbia, and he landed on my beach. And I can say my beach because traditionally I owned it. I always think it's important for people to know who you are and where you come from, and that's why I'm just sharing that with you, a little extra. But I just want to thank you, and Knowledge Keeper Charlie Patton, for your opening prayer and keeping us going in a good way. Maybe I'll probably call you cousin from now on, because he called me cousin twice now. And I really appreciate it from my heart, and it's very nice to hear powerful prayers and keeps us going in a really good way and grounded in the work that we're doing. And I'm grateful to be addressing you today in the unceded lands of the Kainai and Kihaka, the Mohawk people, which holds a special place to the Haudenosaunee as well as Anishinabeg. For First Nations people, nature and culture are inseparable. Our connections to the inherent relationship with our lands, waters, territories are foundations of our life on Mother Earth. And we heard our elder talking about that connection to Mother Earth this morning, and I just want to thank you for that as well. Our values and knowledge systems are rooted in our languages, in our songs, stories, ceremonies, and spaces and places that are sacred to us. Like where I come from, we have totem poles that tell our story, and we didn't have anything in writing, and it explains our history. And they're all animal figures on our totem poles, and that's how closely we are grounded to the animals. Like my late dad used to say, we lived like the killer whales. When we killed a whale, we were whale hunters where I come from, and when the killer whales killed a seal, every whale had its own bite. And if a whale took a bite out of another whale's paw, bite, it would cause a war in that pod. And they inform how we respect our lands and waters and the way we nurture, harvest, and steward our plants and our medicines and animals. As long as we are here on Mother Earth, our responsibilities do not end. Dear delegates, our world today is out of balance. We are fighting global warming. Where I come from in British Columbia, we had atmospheric rivers that flooded and destroyed many homes and reservations and towns and cities. We had fires, and the ocean is getting so warm, the sea lions from California are coming up and destroying our salmon. And we're losing a lot of resources. It's because of that, of the global warming issue. Our knowledge keepers have been raising their voices about the changes they are observing, changes in species migration, extreme weather events, and irreversible impacts to our land and waters. Here in Canada, many of our plants, animals, wetlands, and grasslands are under threat. Livelihoods of our hunters, trappers, fishers, in the spiritual and cultural, physical well-being of our communities are significantly impacted. As Indigenous peoples, we have long championed and balanced relationship with nature, which deeply rooted in our inherent understanding and respect, reciprocity, and responsibility. That says a lot right there, that we looked after this land for thousands and thousands of years before anybody showed up. And it's up to us to start looking after it again the way we used to. To me, that's really important to me. Our cultural, spiritual, and social connection to our land and water may increase our exposure to the impacts of climate change and biodiversity loss, but it is this connection that
So now English should go through. I'm not getting anything. No? Okay. Should have now. We'll just go back to YouTube. Just unplug the J.
I applaud Prime Minister Trudeau and the Government of Canada to their recent announcement to commit up to $800 million to support 4 major Indigenous-led conservation projects across the country. This is an important investment and indicative to the sustained resources necessary to realize the full potential of the Indigenous-led conservation. Indeed, we must elevate the support, the leadership of Indigenous peoples in conservation with a subnational, national, and international biodiversity policy. In Canada, First Nations have led contributions towards realizing the Government of Canada's ambitious commitment in protecting 25% of the lands and waters by 2025 and 30% by 2030. This is done through established Indigenous protected and conserved areas, IPCAs, and related guardian programs. The evidence is clear. Biodiversity thrives in areas where Indigenous peoples have governance and control over their lands. This is not a coincidence. This is Indigenous-led conservation at its best. It is critical that our rights, responsibilities, knowledge, systems be reflected in the new biodiversity goals and targets post-2020 and global biodiversity framework. As Indigenous peoples, our relationship to Mother Earth offers vital teachings and wisdom necessary to restore the balance with all of creation today and the future generations. And having said that, I just want to say thank you to everybody that's here, all the speakers that were before me, and thank you folks out there for listening and giving me the time to address you today. Klako, klako.
Thank you, Chief Jack. I'm very pleased to announce that we have interpretation in the room, so please feel free to connect to your devices or from the equipment in front of you. That's going to help us during this session. Now I would like to invite Mr. Hert Nakimayak, Presidency of the Inuit Taririp Kanatami, to provide your opening remarks. Sir.
First of all, I just want to say uvlami, good morning to everybody, and especially Kuyanani to our Elder Charlie Patton for reminding us why we're here today with his opening prayer. Nothing like having an opening prayer and also reminding us why we are here. Good morning, Vlami, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, Kuyanani for the invitation to speak in this distinguished panel, and then also to the audience. Good morning. I'm grateful to my Mohawk brothers and sisters to allow us to be on their land today so we can meet with each other, share our knowledge and create and do our best to create a better world for our children and grandchildren and as well generations to come. Yesterday, Inuit had a session on Indigenous knowledge, on research and why the work that we do in our regions are so important, so key, and so relevant to why we are here today, and all in advance of ensuring that Indigenous knowledge is included on any research as well. Research is part of our, the mammals that we research are mammals that we rely on for harvesting, to feed our families and also for our livelihood. So we want to ensure that we're doing our best we can to work respectfully and inclusively with our partners. My home is within the Inuit Nunat, our Arctic homeland. The Inuit Nunat, our circumpolar Inuit homeland, covers a vast distance from Chukotka in the far east of Russia, east across the Bering Strait to Alaska, the homeland of the Inupiat, across the Beaufort Sea, where I'm from, to the Inuit Nunangat, the Inuit homeland in Canada, and finally to Greenland, the Clathlit Nunat. So we are circumpolar people. We're one people who reside in 4 different political realities. We have used and occupied the land, coastline, ocean, and ice for over 5,000 years. We have adapted to many changes politically, culturally, and especially now socially and now environmentally. We know through our solidarity we are stronger. Inuit have been calling attention to the rapid change in the Arctic for several decades, changes that affect the land and the ocean and everything that lives on and in it. And these changes affect us as well. These changes are intertwined to the future of our Arctic biodiversity, of which we as Inuit are very much part of and depend upon. As Inuit culture closely entwined with the Arctic environment that has sustained us and nourished us for millennia. Through Inuit-led governance, we have for millennia been actively conserving biodiversity through our Inuit knowledge, laws, and practices. The world is paying attention to the havoc and damage climate change is wreaking on our homelands, the world in which our inherent rights as Indigenous people are anchored. As the sea ice has sustained our culture and livelihoods melts away, interest increases on the potential investment in the region. This will lead to increased shipping and exploration activities that could have a profound effect on the biodiversity integrity of our ecosystems, which we are a part of. It is important that Indigenous rights and worldviews guide planning and decision-making through all stages. Nothing about us without us. This is the foundation of our right to participate in decisions that affect our lives and our cultural survival. IC Inuit Circumpolar Council has developed circumpolar Inuit protocols for equitable and ethical engagement as guidance on how to work with Inuit and Inuit communities in the circumpolar world. These protocols will be vital if we are able to achieve the CBD post-2020 global biodiversity targets. Equitable and ethical engagement must place Inuit and all Indigenous people at the forefront of any activities, discussions, policy developments that affect our homelands and in our rights. We are rights holders, we are not stakeholders. We continue to echo the call for others to recognize our rights, and role in relation to every issue concern to us. It is our message in all the international forums which we are active. It is especially important as we work together to preserve the unique biodiversity of our Arctic and thus contribute to a wider global effort. I will leave you with 3 thoughts today. Number 1, Inuit and all Indigenous peoples' food security, which binds us to our lands, waters, and ice, and the animals and plants, is dependent on a healthy ecosystem. Number 2, Inuit and all Indigenous peoples are part of a global biodiversity. These relationships are important, and our Indigenous knowledge and conservation methods and processes have much to offer current practitioners today and in the future to ensure that we have a stable and solid platform to ensure that our management of the ecosystem is fair and is also respectful. Number 3, conservation measures and meeting the global targets must be done with equity and in respect of the rights of Inuit and Indigenous peoples as declared through the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples are paramount. I would like to say thank you, Kuyanaini, Kwana, Kuyanimik, and have a good day.
Thank you. Now I would like to invite Ms. Cassidy Karum, Métis National Council Presidency, to address the summit.
Thank you. Tansei Kioao, hello everybody. I want to start by beginning with a thank you and my gratitude to the elder, the knowledge keeper, Charlie Patton, for opening this session in a really good way, for welcoming us and for hosting us on your traditional territory, and we're so grateful to be visitors on your beautiful lands. Thank you to the Secretariat on the Convention of Biological Diversity for the invitation to speak alongside my fellow leaders and dignitaries from across the world, and particularly with a really strong and important focus on Indigenous peoples. My name is Cassidy Heron, and I am the president of the Métis National Council. My family comes from St. Louis and Batoche, Saskatchewan, alongside the South Saskatchewan River, the riverbanks that cared for our people for generations, and in turn, our people cared for those riverbanks. We are, of course, in a critical moment where we need to address biodiversity loss and recover the at-risk ecosystems that support all living things and underpin the vitality of our cultures. It is encouraging and exciting to see such strong Indigenous leadership here and being a part of these decision-making spaces that are not built for Indigenous voices. We're carving out spaces ourselves to make sure that our voices are heard. The Métis Nation is a nation of adaptation and resilience and has lived in harmony with nature for generations, with many citizens continuing to live on and from the land. Our culture is deeply rooted in the plants, animals, lands, waters, winds, and fires of the Métis Nation homeland. We have always lived by a traditional law called Wakotowin, understanding that we live within a web of interconnectedness. For the first time, the Métis National Council is here with a full delegation with representatives from all of our governing members, visiting from across the homeland. We're also proud to be with our colleagues, our sisters, Two-Spirit LGBTQIA folks from La Femme Machif Otipemisiwak, the women of the Métis Nation. Métis have a lot to offer within these conversations about living in harmony with nature and being resilient to changing environments. Respecting and enforcing the links between nature and culture is key to addressing the twin crises of biodiversity loss and climate change. The Métis way of life is not separate from nature. It's not alongside or adjacent. It is deeply and intrinsically connected to nature in a spirit of reciprocity and relation. This relationship has gone on for generations without causing harm. So centering Métis knowledge systems in national and international conversations on nature recovery is key to understanding a better path forward for all living things. I am looking forward to more discussions and the upcoming panel, and once again want to thank you for inviting me and the Métis Nation to participate and for putting all of your collective energy into such a critical topic. Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you, and thank you to all the speakers for your opening remarks. You highlighted the value and important relationship between nature and culture. Distinguished participants, the outcome of the summit, it's a declaration. I want also to thank UNESCO, IUCN, IFB, Indigenous people from Canada, the Chinese presidency, who are working on the declaration that will be read tomorrow. To close this first part of the program, I'm pleased to invite the performance from the Yunnan province. May I ask Ms. Lin Huanshu and Mr. Li Huanfu to join the stage. The first song, it's called Golden Bird and Silver Bird Flying. The theme of the next song, which is called Don't Be Shy, it's a folk song of the young nationality to express the beautiful heart love of the young people.
是一个，每走一个，踩呀踩一双。爱问小妹们说个理呀，好时候啊呢，就是还要害羞羞。一次期望，问你啊，每个呀的真心。
在心里说真呀真心话哇，是一个老师要是新人。啊，我小哥们说的一样，好时候啊呢，就是还要害羞羞。
好玩呢，就是海洋，海洋海咻咻，爱玩小妹们说个你呀，好是好玩呢，就是海洋，海洋海咻咻，就是海洋，海洋海咻咻。Thank you very much. Welcome to China.
Thank you very much for this presentation. That concludes our opening session. I thank all the speakers. Now you might leave the podium. And now we move to the high levels panel. I'm pleased to introduce the moderator of the high level panel. This panel will be moderated by Mr. Ramiro Batzins, who I invite to join the podium, and as well Marianne from UNESCO. I also invite the speakers to also join us here at the podium. For the high-level segment, we have Her Excellency Ambassador Eleanor Salavata from Colombia, Ms. Cassidy Caront, Mr. Dario Mejia from the UN Permanent Forum, Ms. Dr. Anne Lagourette from IPBES, Dr. Christopher Rivet, Ms. Georgie Cariño, Mr. Joseph King, and Dr. Suzuki. Please, I invite you to join us, join the podium. Thank you.
So much, appreciate it.
No, thank you so much. I'm sorry for all the...
Oh, no, hey, you know what? Things worked out they always work out at the end.
Yeah.
Hi, good morning. Oh, okay,
Buenos días a cada uno de ustedes. Vamos a
Good morning to everybody. We are going to continue with our agenda. Once the summit was opened, we now move to the high-level panel. In this panel, we will talk about the strengthening of the links between nature and culture. We will do it in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Our discussions are conducted in a spirit of collective construction, good faith, solidarity, and mutual respect. The high-level panel will outline the connections of nature and culture and how these linkages can support the implementation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. To start with our speakers, I will introduce Ambassador Leonor Salaveta. She is permanent representative of Colombia before the UN. She is from the indigenous people Kumuki. She is from the Santa Marta region. She's the first indigenous woman appointed as ambassador of the Colombian state. Ms. Ambassador, the indigenous peoples play a key role in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework to preserve both cultural and biological diversity. What are your views on what currently needs to change to better support indigenous peoples in this role? Ambassador, you have the floor. Good afternoon. Good morning. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. I'm permanent representative on behalf of Colombia to the UN in New York. I'm from the Santa Marta region. In time, there are peoples, communities that we've been able to resist. We've been able to stay, prevail before many pandemics, many plights, pests suffered by mankind. We've been able also to be able to resist to wars, violence, the violence and wars that we have suffered, that mankind has suffered. And here we are, indigenous peoples. We've been able truly to prove, to show that that knowledge, those practices don't need, you just need to know that knowledge to understand that the indigenous peoples maintain certain livelihoods that have allowed us today to live in peace in our territories, that have been practices and knowledge that have guaranteed life in order to be able to exist within the environment in some generic ways of living inside our lands, because we prevail, we maintain our way of thinking, our perspective of the world, our vision, where we consider in many indigenous cultures, as it happens with the indigenous peoples of the Santa Marta Mountains, that all the people have a mother and a father. There is a real spirit for everything that exists. And that spirit is what should never change, because that generates in the mentality, in the mental structure, the idea that there are some other living organisms that are settled so that we can respect one another. That's why this convention on biological diversity continues to be very important. From the moment when in Rio de Janeiro in 1992, people recognized that there are certain societies in which truly we coexist with nature. And that is what we have to change with our agendas. And the agendas should not be a written expression in a piece of paper. The agendas should be practices, real, true practices, where that mentality shall lead us to get to know, to recognize ourselves as siblings, as to recognize that the other living organisms and the other beings are also siblings that are fundamental in human life, in biological life, in nature, and necessarily that is how we change that mental structure in mankind, so that United Nations, so that these conferences shall be effective and fully effective. Well, we have to think about inclusion, the inclusion of all societies, because we all have something to contribute. And that's why I thank the government of Canada that has hosted this COP on this COP15, and that we talk about nature and culture. Culture as peace. You know, cultures, as it happens with peace, it's not outside us, it's inside us. And it's not only in the states and in the systems. Culture also is in the way we think. And of course, it is only logical that it is just like peace. You know, it is having the capacity to understand the world as part of myself, as part of mankind, so that truly land, and not only the land, but also the universe. We are energy, we are electricity, we are power, and that is what the universe is made of. That's what land is made of. And many indigenous and non indigenous cultures, and also scientific research has said that we are part of this universe. And it is fundamental that the states and that the United Nations, maybe through their important bodies such as UNESCO, with all the agencies, that we shall be able to have an interagency coordination that shall allow mankind to strengthen with a holistic vision, to have a comprehensive vision that shall allow us to see the world first as a world that it is inside of us, and that we are part of that world in order to truly promote what we need today. And as it was said by President Gustavo Petro in Colombia, we need justice. We need social justice. We need total peace. And we need the climate justice too. Let's come to an agreement. In social inclusion, we have elements that would strengthen the peoples, they would strengthen societies, they would strengthen the land and the universe. And for that, we need a transforming change that shall cover the political, social, economic aspects, the paradigms of inclusive knowledge, and the historical injustices, such as, for example, colonization and the eviction of lands and the deprivation of resources and the suffering experienced by the indigenous people. There is a need to recognize that. There is a need to transform history. And for that, we consider that fundamental link between linguistic diversity, the cultural diversity, and the conservation of biological diversity, the sustainable use and the participation in the benefits, as well as the need for respecting, preserving, promoting, and maintaining and using languages, especially indigenous languages. It is still very important how solidarity is intertwined, it's woven not only among humans, but rather in the daily practice. Let's change that paradigm of thinking. Let's look for the ways in order to make mankind the brother of nature. Let's conceive ourselves as part of nature, and let's conceive nature as part of ourselves. That's why we recommend that the different declarations that already within the framework of biological diversity, actually, hopefully, our countries shall be able to start creating practices, joint practices. That is, state working groups at government levels, in order to truly be able to start implementing, enforcing, the implementation, the enforcement of the agreements that are created for nature. That is vital and that is essential for mankind. That's why I want to invite you to, so that those cultural connections, those spiritual connections, economic connections, environmental connections, and social connections with the land are of vital importance for the indigenous peoples, providing a unique source of strength, understanding, and resilience. The indigenous peoples are a sample that show that ancestral knowledge has been historical in terms of mankind and land. Today we are alive. It is proved that our knowledge is still vital in order to preserve peace and to preserve the values of land that is suffering a crisis today. With this, I want to highlight that nature and cultures and human culture of every society are interrelated, and we can strengthen each other. Why not? And that the success of the world framework for biological diversity post 2020 depends on values, the celebration, and also biocultural diversity. This message is just to make sure that the states, the governments, the indigenous peoples, the different societies shall be able to go through a transformation path that shall really lead to changing the mindset that we need, that we human beings need. Let's try to interrelate with one another. Let's try to enforce our agreements so that we shall be able to guarantee harmony, the harmony of cultural diversity, and life in harmony with nature. I want to deeply thank you for listening to me. I want to encourage the representatives of the different states to be able to truly seek for the implementation for peace, human peace, and peace with nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And I would like to remind all the next speakers that we only have 7 minutes when you address the plenary. You do have a screen, you have a monitor. Now we are going to present the chief from the First Nations. For Indigenous people, self-governance is crucial for the control and administration of their lands, waters, and resources. How do you and the First Nations governments reflect the links between culture and nature in your land and your stewardship measures? Chief, you have the floor. Chief, you have the floor.
Good. Dunje Ing Luan Man Uye Dachlwe di Ayachat Ageyo Hatu Sauk Ganach Chish Ganian Kahaka Ganach Chish Hadnashone Nashchish Anashnabeg. I introduced myself in my language. My name is Kluani Adamek, and I'm from the Dachlawedi, the killer whale people. My name is Age, which means daughter of the lake, and I'm a proud citizen of Kluani First Nation. Kluani means Uchani in Tlingit, freshwater fish, and Luan Man means lake of many whitefish. The connections that we have to place and space when it comes to nature, land, and water is so intrinsic that it becomes very challenging in a Western colonial way to try to explain that connection. I'm wearing a necklace that has a seaweed design because we're people of the ocean, killer whale people, Dachlawedi. The songs and the stories that we have go back generations. And with Western modern science, we're able to see how when the glaciers were melting over 10,000 years ago, the songs that we have about those glaciers are still sung today. When we talk about nature and conservation, our people are the ones that know and can read and have always known the land. If we think about the last 300 years and the decisions that have been made around the world being made not by Indigenous people, but by governments, institutions that don't reflect that interconnectivity that we see, that we feel, that we know is real. I wonder what would have happened had we put Indigenous peoples in full control of the nature, the land, the water, the earth, and the animals. It's only been in the last 300 to 500 years that we've seen the shifts that we've seen. And while we know climate change is something very real, I look outside Montreal, I was just in Ottawa, and there's no snow this year. Our lake has gone down in Luan Man and Kluani by 10 feet. The Yukon River salmon, where hundreds of salmon, thousands of salmon would go in the Klukshu area, they had 16 salmon. So when we talk about nature and conservation, and we talk about self-determination and self-government, our people have always known how to take care of the land. It is part of who we are. Indigenous peoples have been displaced from making those decisions. And now, while negotiations are taking place internationally, Indigenous peoples need to be at the forefront because it is us who really know. It is the elders that really know the land and the stories and can tell us how we need to make change. I think about some more modern concepts to self-government and self-determination. I come from a nation that has a self-government agreement in which we agreed with the federal government and the territorial government areas in which we would be able to have our own lawmaking powers on our territories. We co-manage Kluane National Park. Is it perfect? No. But we as Luanman, we as Kluane people are able to advance our rights from a lens of who we are and what our responsibilities are in a sacred place like Kluane. We think about the Casca, who are almost there with getting their Indigenous protected and conserved area. There was recently an announcement including Tai Dene Nene, Edzia. Indigenous peoples need to be fully supported and upheld, and our rights need to be respected to manage our own territories because we are the only ones that know how to manage them. We are at a time where internationally there are many crises happening. We are at a time where women continue to go through discrimination, where lives are taken. And for us, as Tlingit and Southern Shoshone people from the Southwest Yukon, it has always been the women that would guide the decisions. It was the matriarchs. Any decision that was made about land or water would always go back to the matriarchs. And so how do First Nations adopt those values and principles and ways of knowing and being? We do that through modern law, legislation. We do that through the way in which we set up our structures in our communities. But we also need our partners, whether it's state partners, international partners, to understand who we are and where we come from and our processes for making decisions. That is one of the most challenging rubs, I would say, is the worldview from an Indigenous worldview to that of a Western colonial worldview. And so you'll hear from speakers today, and I want to acknowledge, one of the first ever ambassadors to serve as a woman, Indigenous woman. This is where we are. And we need to create more space. In that room where negotiations are being made, we need to create that space to hear directly from rights holders. And so with that, I encourage you to spend that time over the next few days and encourage the states that you may be working with to ensure that from a rights-based approach, the right path forward is a rights-based approach. That has to be at the forefront of all the work moving forward, and that especially requires women to be at the forefront and our young people to ensure that it's guided in ways that are reflective of our values and who we are. So with that, take good care. Look forward to chatting perhaps after the panel if you have any questions, and do look forward to hearing from the rest of our speakers. G'nach Chish.
Gracias a la jefa.
Thank you very much, Chief. You are the regional chief of the FN in Yukon since January 2018, and recently was appointed as a member of the consultancy body of the environmental government. She has also been the co-president, co-chair of the working group on COVID of the northern regions. Thank you, Chief. Thank you again. Thank you so very much. We are now going to move forward with Cassidy Caron, a Métis woman. She is the first woman that was elected to be the president of the National Council for the Métis. And she will address all of us and answer or try to answer this question. would you tell us how are biodiversity loss and climate change impacting cultural practices for the Métis and citizens, and how are you responding to those changes leading to conservation?
Thank you very much. Tansei Kyoa, hello again, everybody. Thank you for the question. So the Métis Nation was born in close commune with ecosystems of the Northwest. The historic relationship that our people have with the bison on the prairies, the governance models of the captain of the hunt, the nomadic rhythm of the nation is really the basis for many Métis cultural keystones. Biodiversity loss and climate change are now putting the Northwest especially at risk. It's estimated that the Northwest of what is now known as Canada will see some of the most intense warming, melting of permafrost, and changing landscapes. On the prairie, carbon sequestering grasslands ecosystems are increasingly endangered. This not only poses a risk to the prairie itself, but is also limiting the ability of nature to absorb and store carbon from the atmosphere. There have been many processes and systems and results of these processes and systems that have continuously led to the endangerment of our culture. Colonization, the biodiversity loss, climate change are actively endangering our culture. However, we are very adaptive and resilient people, and the Métis National Council has been working to make really strong process, especially in this past year, in advancing national and international conversations on biodiversity loss and climate change. We're also extremely proud to support our governing members, our families across the Métis Nation homeland as they deliver nature conservation programs in their regions with a variety of really exciting initiatives that strengthen and honor the Métis cultural connection to lands and waters. And we do these programs, these services, these projects to really promote the links between nature and culture. And for example, we have so many incredible programs that are really focused on our young people. There are cultural camps in one of our jurisdictions that happen every season to foster the cultural connection to the lands and pass on the knowledge between generations. We have programs that monitor our medicine plants and fish to understand the health and availability of these cultural keystones and species, and these are actually done by our people. We saw this summer some lands returned back to our people from Parks Canada within the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan, which represents a really strong step forward for reconciliation. And it was also recently announced that the bison would be returning to these lands. And those are my homelands, these lands that have been given back to our people to take care of. The immediate first step was to try and restore it back to the ways that those lands were originally used by returning the bison to these lands. It's a great example of how we are working together with the Government of Canada so that we can go back to the ways when we are taking care of both nature and culture. We also have within one of our jurisdictions the captains of the hunt, one of our traditional governance systems. Those captains have cared for our lands. They monitor our systems and they advance conversations on food security living with the land. These are the ways that we are returning back to our traditional ways while also protecting nature and culture. Our governing members are making amazing progress in planning and advancing the protection of nature through these Métis-led projects, including Métis-led protected and conserved areas. The Métis National Council is proud to support this work, and we hope that within a few years' time that there will be incredible natural areas established by Métis communities where both nature and culture can thrive under Métis protection. We're also, again, really proud to be working with Parks Canada nationally and on the ground through our governing members to establish national urban parks in cities across Canada and across the Métis Nation homeland. Because the Métis Nation now does have a large population of urban Métis, and creating spaces for them also to access nature and practice their culture is critical. The Métis hold a unique and strong perspective on recultivating the relationship that we have with Mother Earth. giving more than we take and holding that relationship in reciprocity. So it's absolutely critical, again, that we are in these spaces. It's critical that the global biodiversity framework affirm Indigenous rights and take inspiration from Indigenous leadership on conserving biodiversity and nature, not only for the benefit of our cultures and human societies, but really for the benefit of all living things. Thank you, Marcy.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation, Cassidy. And we will now introduce Mejia Montalvo from the CENU, from San Andrés, Sotavento. He is a politician by the National University of Colombia with a Master's of Development of the Autonomous Regions of Nicaragua, and he's currently the president of the Permanent Fora of the United Nations on Indigenous Peoples. Mr. Montalvo, the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues is one of the 3 UN mechanisms that deals with Indigenous peoples' rights, with the mandate to discuss Indigenous issues related to economic and social development, cultural and the environment, education, health, and human rights. How could the forum continue to strengthen and promote the nature-culture links? You have the floor, sir. Thank you very much. A warm welcome to all of you, brothers and sisters, my co-panelists, brothers, sisters here, and everyone in the room or watching us from abroad. Thank you for an interesting question. Allow me to tell you that this division between culture and nature was a creation of how people understood the world at a given time. We could say that this was created by a culture that today could be called Western or hegemonic. For most of the indigenous peoples, this division between nature and culture does not exist. Mother Earth is the one with the supreme rights. She provides the main rules, the rules that includes not only nature and culture, but also human beings, rules for waters, for mountains, of the vital cycle of plants. They are the essence, the core of the value system for the indigenous peoples and their knowledge system. These rules are contained and enshrined in the languages, in the ways of gathering, in the ways of family gathering, in the indigenous intrinsic own governance. And they have been passed on generation to generation. But some people with very good training, some of them academics, or maybe some coming from somewhere else, call culture. But to us, they are the rules of nature. They're the rules of the earth. And that is what we can say and call a way of knowledge, a type of knowledge. And this type of knowledge is the one that has allowed us to preserve at least 80% of the biodiversity that is within our territories, even though we only represent 6% of the global population, and even though we account for only 18% of the global surface area. So this is the result of our fight so that this holistic vision is included in the United Nations and in the governments. So from the start, the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues has promoted this holistic vision, and we will keep on doing that. With the recommendations that we have provided the academia, the United Nations, and the government, so they take this into account during the seventh period of the sessions 8 years ago was biodiversity, cultural diversity, and also having the new challenges as a result. At the seventh session, that was back in 2008, we launched to the world the need to recognize and understand harmony and balance with Mother Earth. But we have not been listened to. But very little time after that, some politicians, scientists, filmmakers, documentary makers that were quite well known started to echo those words. And they did it in front of the spotlight, and they were heard. Our friend Al Gore, he was even given a prize for this quote unquote fantastic idea. We welcome the fact that it's being listened to, but that is the essence of the Indigenous people's message. The Permanent Forum even called the world to consider a different view of the relationship with nature and propose a recognition of the International Mother Earth Day, which fortunately was adopted by the UNGA, and today is celebrated every year on April 22nd. Sadly, the interactive dialogue has changed the focus. So now when you talk about harmony with nature, you don't even invite Indigenous peoples to have a voice. I reiterate that the members of the Permanent Forum have contributed with specific studies and will continue to contribute with this holistic vision. For example, the request that we have made before this Conference of the Parties to recognize Indigenous territories as having the capacity to conserve biodiversity. And I have just said that. And in consequence, this should be a different category from protected areas and other area-based conservative measures. This is a paramount, a fundamental contribution that we hope that all the party states will take up as their own, to the extent that this recommendation was conveyed to the members through the ECOSOC in July, and it was adopted. In 2023, our special theme will be Indigenous people, human, planetary, and territorial health, and climate change, a right-based approach. We're going to meet at the UN headquarters in New York from the 17th to the 28th of April in 2023. You're cordially invited. Please go there to listen our voices, our claim from the Indigenous people, their deliberations, their contributions. It is important that the UN agencies, the UN listens to us. I would like to end by thanking the government of Canada, the government of China, and the Secretariat for allowing us to be here and for welcoming the recommendations that we made in Nairobi from our Permanent Forum, that this summit was inaugurated with the blessing and the invocation from the Indigenous peoples. That looks very nice, and we accept that. But we now want to see the measures also being adopted, because otherwise this becomes really just a matter of decoration and folklore. We are active individuals and we contribute to the real care of the biodiversity. We are not just a show. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Because of time constraints, we are going to give 5 minutes to each of the speakers, and we are now going to invite Dr. Anne Garrigou-Drier. She has been a pioneer in integrating PBS and IPBS, and we're going to actually tell you BES has from its very start pioneered integration of the best science with a wide range of knowledge system, values, and worldviews. Could you please give us some examples on how this inclusive approach has enriched the key findings of the IPBES?
So perhaps just to explain a little bit, IBES is an organization at the interface between science and policy. And what we do is to provide assessment reports, big reports, which synthesize the state of knowledge regarding biodiversity and regarding the contributions that it provides to people. And today I'd like to comment on two streams of work of IBES, which are, I think, of particular relevance to the theme of today, which is nature and culture. First, that's the work that IBES has been doing on indigenous and local knowledge. And the second is the work that IBES has been doing on the multiple values of biodiversity. So quickly then, IBES has from the very beginning really recognized the importance of including different knowledge systems in our work, and we work in our reports not only with scientific knowledge, but also with indigenous and local knowledge. This is reflected in the basis document which IBES has approved for itself, its conceptual framework, which reflects these multiple values. So we have a task force, we have a little secretariat that supports this work. And I say this because this is supported by our colleagues at UNESCO, Miriam Bouamra and her team and others. And I use the opportunity to thank UNESCO for their support with the IBES work on indigenous and local knowledge. In fact, there has been really groundbreaking approaches which have been followed, and that has led all of the governments, the 140 governments that are members of IBES, to approve an approach to working with indigenous and local knowledge. And so this approach has multiple steps, and I cannot really do justice to it, but just to say that we really involve indigenous and local knowledge holders in all of the chapters, in all of our assessment reports, first of all, but we also have workshop dialogues with indigenous people and local communities at various stages of the process of the production of our assessments, at the definition of the questions, and also along the way when there is an opportunity to review drafts and provide comments, and at the end to give back the conclusions and reflect on those that are of particular relevance to the indigenous people and local communities who contributed to the work of IBES. And of course, this is work in the making. It's a bit innovative, and so we always try to improve, to learn from our experiences, always in dialogue with indigenous people and local communities. And one important conclusion from one of our landmark reports, the Global Assessment of Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, which came out in 2019, was that at least a quarter of the global land area in the world is traditionally owned, a quarter managed, used, or occupied by indigenous people, that nature managed by indigenous people and local communities is under pressure, increasing pressure, but nature is generally declining less rapidly in indigenous people's land. If I have a little bit more time, I don't see the timer here. I'll comment on my second point, which is on the values. And so IBES has done recently a report on the different values of biodiversity. The point of departure for that work was a conclusion from our global assessment report that we have a global biodiversity crisis because we failed to take into account all of the different values of biodiversity. I think this has been really featured very prominently here since the beginning of the day. So for example, we have a typology of values now which reflects the very rich nature of the interactions between people and nature. People see themselves in this typology as living from, with, in, and as nature. And the assessment has looked at how nature is valued around the world in so many different contexts, and concluded, among others, that there is a dominating valuation methods which tend to give more importance to valuing the material contributions that people derive from nature, a little bit also the regulating contributions, the capacity of systems to provide pollinators or clean air or clean water, but that our systems fail to value what Ibes calls the non-material or the immaterial contributions, all of those that are dear to our hearts, essential to our living, and those are the social cultural aspects related to biodiversity. And also just sharing, to close, two quick conclusions from this values assessment. First, recognizing and respecting Indigenous and local knowledge and their associated diversity of values can lead to more equitable and sustainable outcomes. This has been established. It's an established key finding based on the evidence found. And the second and last one is that more equitable and sustainable policy outcomes are more likely to be achieved when decision-making processes recognize and balance the representation of the diverse values of nature, and also address social and economic power asymmetries among actors. I thank you for your attention. Thank you so much.
Gracias, doctora. Voy a pasarle.
Thank you, Doctor. I'm going to give the mic to our moderator. Mariam, please. Thank you very much.
A little round of different visions of our beautiful planet Earth. I will ask now Professor David Suzuki, who is a scientist and co-founder of the David Suzuki Foundation. He has won many awards. I don't have the time to quote them all. You've heard from this panel, and you know that there are several cultures that are valuing and understanding nature very differently, different perspective, based on very different principles, including responsibility, solidarity, reciprocity. We heard today that there was also a principle of giving more than receiving. In your experience and in your work, how far do you think that we are from living in a world in harmony with nature, which is the vision by 2050, but how far are we? Professor Suzuki.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I think basically the panelists from Colombia has defined very clearly what an Indigenous perspective can be. The problem is that most people in the world now live in big cities. And in Canada, 85% of us now live in big cities. And in a big city, it's easy to focus on what is our priority, which is our job. We need a job to earn the money to buy the things that we want or need. And so the economy assumes a dominant place in our culture. And for the last 500 years, we've had the spread of a perspective, a priority shaped by resourcism, that is an attitude that looks out at the world as opportunity for us. And we see in new lands occupied by Indigenous people for thousands of years, what the new mindset was opportunity. Wow, we've got to, and those Indigenous people, they had nothing to contribute. They were an impediment to getting at the resources that we've had. And it's a very exciting moment now when Indigenous people are simply not putting up with that any longer and exerting their sovereignty and their cultural values. And we need it. We need it. And we have been dominated now by this culture in which human constructs of economics, of politics, and law now have become the guiding attitudes towards nature. Nature is, in our dominant culture now, is simply an opportunity or a resource. And we've run the limit. We're at the end of that. This has been a very destructive agent, and we need to have a fundamental shift. And thank goodness Indigenous people have held on to their culture, their languages, and their commitment to protect nature. You see, the problem we have is that in a resources world in which everything is an opportunity for us, there's no reciprocity. There is no sense of responsibility towards it. You see it in what the movements happening in North America today, the drive to freedom. Freedom without responsibility is not freedom, it's anarchy. It's a rejection of society. And so we've got to learn, for me, fundamental lessons that we gain from an Indigenous perspective is that we live in a world where everything is connected to everything else. And so whatever we do has repercussions and therefore must carry responsibility. And the other thing you hear over and over in Indigenous communities, and you'll certainly hear it in Montreal, in Mohawk territory, is talking constantly about a perspective of 7 generations. You think in the dominant society, our perspective is determined by when is the next election, or what is a quarterly report for my corporation. Indigenous people talk about 7 generations, reflecting on what we've inherited from 7 generations of our ancestors and the implications of what we do today and what that will be for 7 generations of our successors. And we desperately need that perspective. Just let me say one profound lesson I learned when I went with Wade Davis, the great anthropologist, to a small village on the mountain in the Andes in Peru. And I learned the villagers grow up, the children grow up being taught that the mountain their village is on is an apu. Apu in their language means a god. And as long as that apu casts its shadow on that village, it will guide the fate of those children. And Wade said to me, imagine how they treat that mountain compared to a child who grows up in Trail, British Columbia, where they are taught those mountains are full of gold, silver, and iron. The way we see the world shapes the way that we treat it. And for too long now, we've had this attitude that everything out there is for us, and there is no responsibility that comes from the way that we're using Mother Nature. So I thank the Indigenous people around the world for retaining their cultural values, the way that they see the world, that brings to us a sense of 7 generation perspective and responsibility that comes with the benefits of Mother Earth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Suzuki. So responsibility, interdependency, long-term, and the way we see the world is the way we shape it and we live on it. I'm going to move now to our next speaker, which is Dr. Christophe Rivet, who is president of the Canadian Committee of International Council on Monuments and Sites, ICOMOS. And I want to ask you, based on what you heard on the panel so far, the way we live on this earth, the way we shape our relationship with it, how concretely can we conserve both nature and culture in your experience?
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank, first and foremost, Elder Patton for hosting us on Mohawk traditional territory. It is important to remind ourselves at every opportunity that this is the case, that we are hosted by someone. And this gives us the perspective to look at the challenges that we're facing with the hope that we can work together. In terms of ICOMOS, the question that you've raised is one that's been at the heart of our work for a few years now. We've had the opportunity to work with IUCN, whom I wish to thank for the opportunity for us to be here today, on matters that highlight the connection between culture and nature. We've had a number of initiatives looking at how new designations, new ways of managing space and places that are of heritage importance, how those could be better defined. We've been involved in the work of the IPCC as recently as a few months ago, highlighting the importance of measuring the impacts of climate change on human populations and their culture. We've set up an international working group on Indigenous heritage because we understand that particular relationship. As Professor Suzuki just highlighted, the knowledge that is in the hands and the hearts and the minds and the soul of Indigenous people around the world is incredibly precious for humanity as a whole to be able to take on. And we've been involved in climate heritage matters as well with various United Nations agencies. My fellow panelist here, Mejia, Mr. Mejia highlighted the issue of rights and how critical it is to recognize that when it comes to protecting heritage, cultural and natural, it is fundamentally a matter of rights. And I'll finally just highlight the fact that we have had an awards program, our organization, that highlights the relationship between nature and culture. Just this year, we've awarded funds and grants to organizations in Guatemala, in Sierra Leone, to pursue measures to protect both cultural and natural heritage. But my point here is really the fact that when it comes to cultural diversity and biodiversity, they are indissociable. They cannot be dissociated. And this, while we Western, I'm going to include myself in this definition, we Western peoples may have forgotten that relationship. It was there. We have evidence through archaeology, through history, that the relationship between an understanding of one's environment and cultural expression was core. And it was inspiration for art. It was inspiration for language. It shaped language. It was inspiration for social interactions. And really, fundamentally, we are talking about, in many cases, of kinship between animals and peoples. So what I do want to put a particular emphasis on, and again, Professor Suzuki highlighted that very, very important fact, is that the majority of our population on this planet now lives in cities. So there's a high risk of disconnect between what happens to the environment and what is essential for the survival of not just Earth, but us ourselves as a species. And this is where cultural heritage conservation becomes a really important partner. We are a new partner. This is a new relationship that we're forging with the environmental groups. It's one where we see this line being between nature and culture being blurred, and it's time that it should be blurred. It should remain that way. Where heritage conservation offers solutions is that we've advocated for decades to promote the maintenance of existing buildings, existing places, which leads to less destruction of habitats. And just as recently as a few weeks ago, a number of governments here in Canada have decided to compromise green areas, protected areas, in order to push for new housing. This is not a sustainable strategy. And we in heritage conservation can offer tools to address the need not to destroy habitats. We also have advocated for the use of fewer materials, fewer resources. Why? Because we emphasize, again, using what exists and adapting. And this is particularly critical in a world where we are measuring carbon emissions. And finally, in highlighting the fact that our world population is urbanized, we need to focus on that reality to really address the impact. This is about consumption. It's about needs like housing. It's about needs like green spaces. It's about needs like food. We cannot tackle this challenge without understanding that we have to establish those relationships between people and the environment. And the heritage sector, cultural and natural, is now at a crossroad where we need fundamentally to work together. So this is a really rare experience where we can bring different forms of knowledge, traditional, indigenous, scientific, from the cultural, from the natural. And this is where, to answer your question, I think it is that those partnerships and those different sets of tools that allow us to address these very difficult challenges.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing some of the tools and re-emphasizing the issue of possible disconnect between people and what we call nature in some part of the world, especially in urban cities. And I would like to continue with concrete actions with our next speaker, Ms. Georgie Carino from the Philippines, who is a leading advocate for indigenous people rights and indigenous knowledge. And we just mentioned both the preciousness of indigenous knowledge and the importance of rights. You've been working on the local biodiversity outlooks, and the number 2 has been out. You're the co-lead author of the second edition, and I would like to build on that work, Georgie Carino. Please, can you present to us, based on your work, what are the necessary steps for the transitions that are needed for us to live and walk the talk about living in harmony with nature, this 2050 vision of the CBD? What are the concrete steps and transition? What can you share with us about your work on these local biodiversity outlooks, please?
Thank you very much, Miriam. So, Local Biodiversity Outlooks was first launched at COP13 held in Mexico, and as a complementary publication to Global Biodiversity Outlooks 4. The CBD parties welcomed the report and requested that a second edition be prepared to accompany Global Biodiversity Outlooks 5. So since then, working on Local Biodiversity Outlook has become an important undertaking of indigenous peoples and local communities in our engagement with the whole of the convention, with parties, with the secretariat, with scientists, with civil society, and many other actors. The core of Local Biodiversity Outlooks are written by authors from around the world. In LBO2, we have more than 50 authors from different regions of the world. And they actually give voice to the pains of Mother Earth from around the world, as told by her children, her carers, and healers. And these are indigenous peoples and local communities who are actively living with biological diversity. They're called genes, species, and ecosystems, but these are also our food, our relations, and our homelands. An underlying message is that putting the cultures and values and rights of indigenous peoples and local communities at the heart of the 2050 biodiversity strategy would deliver sustainable livelihoods and well-being and very positive outcomes for biodiversity, climate, and sustainable development. So the report identifies 6 critical transitions which are required towards achieving the 2050 vision. And these transitions are around first, land, securing land rights and customary land tenure of indigenous peoples and local communities. Second, around food systems, revitalizing indigenous and local sustainable food systems, and also genetic diversity. Third, on culture, recognizing and respecting diverse ways of knowing and doing, particularly indigenous peoples' cultures. Governance, inclusive decision-making, and self-determined development. Economies, sustainable use of resources, and the flourishing of diverse local economies. And finally, incentives and finance, rewarding effective indigenous solutions and stop financing destruction. So these are also themes which Indigenous peoples and local communities are wishing to see embedded in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework towards our common vision towards living in harmony with nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joji Carino. Very concrete steps and themes to be discussed in the post-2020 framework for it to be ambitious and inclusive. Our last speaker today, before I give the floor to the audience, is Mr. Joseph King, who is a senior director, Office of the Director General, International Center for the Study of the Preservation and Restoration of Cultural Property, ICROM. That's your third acronym of the day. And Mr. King, I would like to ask you, why do you think that the links between what we call nature and culture are not fully understood, these interactions, and what are the main challenges to develop a holistic approach?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. And before I begin, I would like to thank the Government of Canada and the Government of China, the Secretariat of the CBD, and also IUCN, actually, for the opportunity to be here at the forum. This is the first time that ICROM has been invited to attend a CBD COP, and we look forward very much to this being the beginning of a strong relationship between the CBD Secretariat, other stakeholders, other rights holders in our effort to together protect our biodiversity. Now, when I think about the challenges to a holistic approach, I guess I start first from where we are coming from. I've been working myself for the past 25 years within the World Heritage Convention, which is designed on its face as a way to integrate concern for cultural and natural heritage, including biodiversity. But if you look at the practices at the time that I got involved in World Heritage 25 years ago, you would find that in fact, there wasn't a lot of integration between cultural and natural heritage at that point in time. The cultural heritage professionals, people like myself, were mostly concerned about cultural heritage in relation to buildings, how buildings were built, what materials we were using, what the architectural design was. But the fact of the matter is we were not focused on the people using that built heritage, on the larger cultural context that that heritage was sitting in. And even more importantly, we were not really looking at the natural heritage context, the environmental context, if I can use that word, in which it was situated in. And I'll be honest with you, conversely, my impression at least was that those people advocating for natural heritage protection were not necessarily focused on the cultural components of natural heritage sites, of protected areas. They weren't particularly looking at issues of how people use those sites, how those people were actually protecting their biodiversity. One of the things that I've been really happy to hear today is that acknowledgement that many Indigenous cultures never have drawn this division between cultural heritage or culture and nature, that it's not built into those cultures. And it actually comes from us that we've created that division. And I think now we need to go back and learn from those people to actually bring these things back together again, to meld these things back together again. Now, I'm happy to say that we have actually come a long way since 25 years ago when I started in the World Heritage Convention. And there is a slightly more holistic, I think, holistic viewpoint now. We're looking at things from a cultural landscape approach. We're looking at also an urban landscape approach. And I think that's also important. We're talking about historic urban landscapes, because even in an urban environment, there's nature there. There's a really important nature there. And I think we need to look at those urban landscapes and the larger cultural landscapes in a holistic way. But so to go back to your question, there are still significant challenges that we have. One problem that we have is that we don't speak a common language. And here I'm talking about from the professional point of view. We have our way of communicating, and we don't use the same terminologies necessarily that natural heritage professionals use. We don't have a common way of talking about things. I experienced this in another arena, which was the disaster risk management community. When we as cultural heritage professionals went to the disaster risk community and said we need to be talking together, we realized that we were using completely different terminologies. And I think that's also somewhat true in the in this trying to link cultural heritage and natural heritage. So we need to figure out better ways to communicate and to understand each other better, use common language. I think the second thing, though, in the issue of language, which is even far more important, is that of using languages in order to develop more people-centered approaches to conservation. We need to be working with local populations because they ultimately are the protectors of both the cultural heritage and the natural heritage and the biodiversity. So we need to be better working with those communities. And in doing that, we also have very much to pay attention to rights-based approaches to the human rights aspects of this. But to do that, we have to talk with people. We have to recognize the values that they place on the land. We have to begin discussing with them, and we need, therefore, to be able to speak their languages. We sit here and we speak French and we speak English, and maybe we have translation into Spanish or Chinese or Russian, or I actually don't know what's being discussed here now. But we actually need to be speaking to people in their own languages, and I think that is such an important thing, because in order to understand them, the words that they use, the concepts that they have in relation to this culture and nature mix, actually also emanates from their language. And so we need to be able to speak with them in their own languages. And I think that's the only way we can understand the local knowledge systems, the traditional knowledge systems, and all of those are forms of cultural heritage also, and they together go into the protection of biodiversity of places. I think there's something else that we need to that we need to think about in that sense. Excuse me, I've lost my place for a second. That we, okay, this idea of better communication. And I think this is something that I feel really, really strongly about. Oftentimes we as the professionals go into a community and we tell people, we talk to people, we say to them, this is what's important. You need to understand this is what's important, and you need to do things to be able to protect this biodiversity or to be able to protect this cultural heritage. No. That is the absolute wrong and inverse way of going in and working with people. We have to go in first and we have to listen. The skill that we need as cultural heritage professionals and as natural heritage professionals is to go to communities and ask them to talk to us first and to listen to what they have to say. Because only when we understand what's important to them, and only when we understand what values they place on the land and what values they place on the cultural heritage and on the natural heritage, will we ultimately be able to work together with them to protect the cultural heritage. So I think this issue of we're not teaching, we're learning, and we're not telling, we're listening, and I think those are really the important concepts that we need to make. To just conclude, I want to say that again that ICRAM stands ready to collaborate on the new program that's been discussed here during the week here on this integrated approach to nature and culture conservation. And we've already been working with IUCN and in collaboration with ICOMOS and UNESCO on the World Heritage Leadership Program, which I'm happy was mentioned already earlier as a supporter of this particular summit today. And I actually also want to acknowledge my friend Tim Badman, who's sitting here on the front row, who, since he's gotten to IUCN and was the head of World Heritage, the World Heritage Program at IUCN, has done a lot of work on bringing us together within the World Heritage context.
Thank you.
So I just want to thank you all for that and say that we're ready to work with you in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. King, and thank you for reminding us, before I open the floor to the audience, about the importance of languages. This is going to be key in our joint program of work with CBD and IUCN, and also on the declaration to respect the cultural diversity, the linguistic diversity, and also to be able to find a common language to listen, as you have said, to each other. I want to thank all the panelists warmly for their inputs, insight. Maybe we can have a round of applause for them. Thank you so much. And then we would like to listen to you. So please, there are some microphones in the room. There is one here, one there, and maybe behind. I can't see really. I've got the spots. But don't be shy. If you have any questions or any inputs that you would like to share with the panelists, and if you have a specific question for one of our panelists, please just say to who. So she's prepared for an answer. And please introduce yourself. Yes, I can see you. Introduce yourself and ask your question. Thank you so much, sir.
Muchas gracias. Mi nombre es Juan León de Guatemala, Maya Quiché.
My name is Juan León from Guatemala. We are participating here in the events that are being held in order to make a contribution to the solution of the world problem that we are facing. A question for all the panelists. We talk a lot about the importance of participation, the decision making, the knowledge, and the contributions of the indigenous people in the world. The governments, likewise, some more, some less, recognize that. And they do that here in the different discussions. But I find a contradiction, a deep contradiction with that before the facts, the events, because the indigenous peoples are the active people who preserve nature from the very beginning, from the beginning of the discoveries, the discovery of knowledge. But at the same time, most of the countries are using repression methods, incarceration, persecution, eviction, robbery. They are stealing the lands where precisely biodiversity occurs. So, in this sense, in the framework agreement, and now in our event, we talk about the importance of language, the importance of language. But how is it that we are going to preserve that if we don't see the changes in the government's policies in terms of recognizing and respecting the rights? How is it that we can achieve that if that doesn't change?
Take another question. Yes, maybe two other, and then I will check who of the panelists wants to listen to this important question that was raised. Yes, sir, please, on here. Yes, go ahead, and then next I will ask you to move forward. Please introduce yourself and your question. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Je m'appelle Joseph Tongwa.
Thank you very much. My name is Joseph Konda. I am a leader of the Indigenous people of my country, and I work for the International Alliance for the help of the Indigenous people. I represent the Apak people. Thank you so much for the panelists. And my question is a question to Dr. Anne from the EPBS. The IPBS has shown in its evaluation the role of the indigenous people and the maintenance of biodiversity, the link between nature, between culture and biodiversity. So my question is, and this is an evidence, this is absolutely clear. So it's, clear. So my question is now, how can we put this into practice in the national politics, in the national political systems? Because these indigenous people have already told the politicians about it. So how are you going to put it into practice? How are you going to evaluate this? How are you going to make this happen? That's my question. This could be an indicator for the member states to also help indigenous people to maintain the biodiversity and the community and the landscape. Thank you very much. Thank you. So that was for Dr. Anne, I'm sure she took note of this question. To you, please. The lady there, please. Please say who you are and ask your question, please.
If it's okay. So
No, yes, you can. We can speak English, French, Spanish.
So my name is Ina Lehmann. I work with the Institute for Environmental Studies at the Free University of Amsterdam in Netherlands. And my question is to Jorge Corino, just very briefly, whether you could comment on the progress that is being made on all the issues you've been mentioning at these negotiations, especially with regard to the negotiations on Target 3, and how optimistic you are that there will be a good outcome, and maybe also how you assess the postponement of the negotiations on Target 3 yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Joji and then Anne to answer the specific questions, and then any member of the panel wants to address the issue of participation, decision-making, and the contradiction that was raised? So please, Joji, Anne, and then...
Thank you for that question, because this is still unfolding in the current negotiations. However, the fact that this summit is taking place and that the IPBES report has come out and governments are actually acknowledging, even in the course of the negotiations, that indigenous peoples are making huge contributions. The Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity has been extremely well organized and engaged with the parties. And we are hoping that through making our presence felt and making very, very concrete proposals in the goals and targets and in the whole framework, we will be listened to. Of course, it's an intergovernmental negotiation. We've already made good progress in terms of the acknowledgement of key principles in the sections on, I think, Target 9, Paragraph 9. The target on conservation, in which indigenous peoples are asking for indigenous territories and customary lands and waters to be recognized as distinct from protected areas and other effective area-based conservation measures. I think this will be a core test as to whether or not governments within the current strategy will really take steps in the countries to actually recognize our territories, which now overlap most of the key biodiversity areas. So let's keep our spirits up and keep talking to the governments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joji. Anne, please.
Yes, thank you for the question. I think my response will go very much along the lines of what Joji said. So the work of IPBES is really about providing the information. And so we provide this report on knowledge regarding various aspects, and I have highlighted here regarding indigenous and local knowledge. But in a way, that's where the work of IPBES itself stops. However, that knowledge now is out there. We do summary for policymakers. We have ways to make that knowledge known, and it in a way provides the ammunitions, if you will, the weapons of a diversity of stakeholders. So governments, but also any kinds of actors of the civil society, just like citizens have been using the conclusions of the IPCC to take the question of climate change into their own hands and hope to make some changes themselves. That the vision is very much the same for IPBES, which is for biodiversity what IPCC is for climate. And so when the conclusions from the IPBES global assessment say that there is a huge amount of land that is being managed by indigenous people and local communities, and that overall they tend to do that quite well and much better than others. That's quite powerful knowledge, and there is a lot of science and knowledge that backs this up, which people have access to. Everything is in the public domain. And so that is the only thing we can do is provide the knowledge. Knowledge has a lot of power, and then we hope to empower a diversity of stakeholders to really have an impact on the situation on the ground.
Thank you very much, Anne. So I come back to the question, the first question that was asked. Anybody from the panel? Yes, please, go on, please.
Thank you so much for the question, and I'm really happy that you raised it, and want to acknowledge that as Indigenous peoples around the world, so many of us are in different places as it relates to the ways in which we work with nation states. You know, in Canada, we've just established the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as law. An action plan is being developed. I certainly want to acknowledge that there's other brothers and sisters around the world who are still at a place that they're fighting to even be acknowledged as a people. So we are navigating, you know, some incredibly challenging times with respect to how Indigenous people's rights are being honored and respected. And I think one of the most powerful moments in attending and coming to these international forums is the ways in which we can support each other as a collective. And, you know, the Permanent Forum is a great way for us to advance that work. I do feel that there needs to be more support for developing mechanisms to ensure that rights are honored and upheld internationally. And I don't have a legal background, so I won't pretend to. But there's definitely a space, I think, for us to work more collaboratively together, despite the differences that we may have in terms of how we work with our countries, nation states, and governments. There's a lot, I think, to learn from those nations who have developed their own agreements when it's about co-management or ensuring that, you know, citizenship, nationhood, looking at the lands and the waters and how those are included in perhaps a modern agreement may be helpful. And so I think sometimes it's a matter of sharing that information amongst each other, but also how do we collectively hold nation states and governments to account as a collective, and would like to see more of that taking place, because certainly I acknowledge that it is an incredibly challenging time for so many Indigenous peoples around the world, and here in Canada, not to say we still don't have communities without clean drinking water. You know, we've got missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, 4 women who were found, and the challenge of whether they were going to even try to look for the others and the remains. Like, that's what we're still dealing with in Canada. At the same time, we have seen strides in terms of the respect and honoring of agreements. And so it's really important, I think, to find more ways that we can be collaborative on the issues that we're all dealing with. And so, you know, that might seem a bit fluffy to some, but I do think that quite honestly, it is really about being united as peoples around the world. And the more that we see these connections being made, and the more that we see us learning from each other, you know, we'll continue to stand with each other so that nobody's left behind. So that would be, I think, one of the larger calls to action, is how do we do that?
Thank you very much, Chief Kwani Ademek. Thank you. And I think it seemed very important to recall this message before we conclude this first high-level panel, that we are here together, interdependent, completely interdependent of each other and with what we call nature. And this summit is indeed to work more collaboratively and to listen to all the stakeholders that can help us to make this change that we need to make. We are running out of time. We were delayed this morning. We do apologize for all the technical glitches that make us delay, but you will have the space. Now we're going to break for lunch. If some of the members of the panelists that I, again, on your behalf, warmly thank each of you for your contribution and your insights. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the audience. Thank you very much to the interpreters. We're going to resume at 1:50 p.m. in this same room with the next panel. And it's today and tomorrow the opportunity to discuss those very important issues. And we hope that these issues are going to be reflected in the post-2020. Thank you all again. Thank you to the Secretariat of the CBD for organizing that, and to our partner IUCN and IEB and all the other partners that made this summit possible. Happy lunch, and see you in less than an hour. Thank you so much.